We're about to start the formal program for tonight, and for that I would like to invite Mr. Kamau Kunyiha, who I can see is very busy talking to Rose. Kamau, are you with me? So Kamau is the CEO for Creditinfo Kenya.
How do we, as Creditinfo, deliver services to our clients that are responding to their issues, to challenges that they're finding every day in running their operations? And the general thing that, or the usual way we were doing things before was we build, or we assume there's an issue, we build, and then we come and present to you as a solution. That does not always necessarily work. Sometimes it actually helps to be able to get people in a room together, understand what your issues are, and see if we can actually find a solution to the challenges that you're facing. So that was the genesis of actually beginning the whole Fireside series chat. Get industry experts, come and share their experiences, deliberate, and hopefully we can be able to find solutions in any of these challenges that we're finding. So this is one of very many sessions that we hope to have in the coming year. But anyway, I'm not meant to be talking much today. Today I just want to give you a brief introduction about who we are as Creditinfo. As Ali said, we are a credit bureau, third registered or licensed credit bureau in Kenya. We are a global firm in 33 plus markets globally. And I think as of this year, I believe we are #1 credit bureau in terms of footprint globally. Thank you. So we're growing, and probably the youngest as well. We only started back in '97, so just over 20 years old in operations. So Creditinfo in Kenya, who are we, what do we do? Other than being a credit bureau, I think we'd like to pride ourselves as a risk management consulting firm. And this is just a short snippet of who we are and what we do.
The world of data is changing how we live our everyday lives and is impacting our lives at every moment. But what do you know about your customers? As a financial institution, do you understand the risk of your potential customers? Can you identify the most profitable ones amongst them? At Creditinfo, we work with financial institutions to identify the most profitable customers by using diverse data sets to determine individuals' credit worthiness, using both structured and unstructured data. Among the services we offer to assist financial institutions includes automation of the capture and decision process for new credit applications. Other services include development of bespoke scorecards, credit risk management consulting, and portfolio management. At Creditinfo, we believe that every customer is unique and everyone deserves a chance.
So that, as is the best summary I could give on who Creditinfo are. A risk management company actually helping our customers identify their most profitable customers that they should engage with, whatever service they're looking at engaging. So, yes, we are a bureau, but we want to be more than just a bureau. We want to be more than that. And if you look at the structure of a bureau, the way the bureau was before in the beginning, it was all about structured data stored in a warehouse. That, as far as Creditinfo is concerned, is old. The structured data that you have in a database is old. In Kenya, it's updated once a month. By the time I'm making a decision on a customer who has done probably 3 or 4 loans in a month or in a week or in a day, that monthly data is not actually useful in any given decision-making process that you're looking at. You need more advanced data, something that's more live, something that's actually active. Live data. We had situations where you're able to get information working with your telcos, getting information from telcos, social media, and all sorts of different data that we are generating from the computers, our mobile phones that we carry with us. That, I know, yes, there are data issues, data security issues that have been coming up, availability of that data and use of that data, but we've been able to go beyond that, and even in Kenya, introduce and release a psychometric scorecard to actually build and actually find risk parameters based on people's risk. So lots of data, you're getting a lot of data that you can use for scoring. You may ask me the question, on structured data it's very easy. I put in an ID, I get a report and it tells me about him. So you're telling me about live data. How do I take live data into an environment where I'm meant to make a decision very quickly? So we build an environment for you. We build and give you an environment that is able to access or absorb all this data. You sit together with our risk consultants. We build and find unique, predictable data from these data sets. What can we use to be able to determine risk from this people that you're looking at? And you get a score and a decision and a limit, all from one environment based on rules that we set and agree on and parameterize on the platform, all in one step, in one platform. Then it becomes more complicated, it becomes tricky. You're now looking at not just one data set, a lot of data sets, it's live, it's moving. So obviously, the next thing you're gonna have is risks, because people can start manipulating or trying to manipulate decisions because you're using data that's live, that's not structured, it's not stored. So people will try and find ways to actually play around with it. So one, the platform has to be able to deal with fraud. One of the key things that we want to be able to discuss here today, a key problem that we are facing in Kenya. What do you do in a situation or in your third world like we're in, where majority of the people do not have access to facilities? How do you actually assess this person's risk? Talk about data security and what is coming up. Google restricting your ability to be able to scrape data from the phones. How else are you going to identify new customers, profitable customers? So I now have my customer. I've lent to him, he's good. But then what next? How do I make my portfolio as profitable as possible? So other than just your acquisition strategy, we look at actually providing solutions at a portfolio level. Solutions that can actually look at actually giving you a response to how do you optimize your collections. Not stab in the back or the highest guy, the highest balance, start calling that person. Who do you call first? Who is more likely to pay you so that you can get your money quickly? Who do you want to get on the phone quickly so that they prioritize your payments? End of term engagement. The biggest thing that we have seen from the data here in Kenya, and I'll show you, is the migration of customers from one lender to the next, because they move very quickly to the next person who is giving them the next best offer. How do you retain your customers as much as possible? How can we work through the data to identify these customers early enough so that you can be able to provide them with an offer that is fitting to them so that they remain and be loyal to you? You look at things like IFRS 9, which is regulatory compliance. This is just a quick video of just showing migration of customers between lenders. And it's a true image of data move of customers in Kenya between banks. The colors don't mean anything, so don't try and make it up to figure out what it is. But you can see the movement of customers across different lenders, and none is actually being loyal to any. It's always just moving to the next guy who is willing to give them the best facility. Sorry? So in a nutshell, who we are. As it says, we're experts in credit risk management, not just by telling you you're listed or not listed, but getting into more intimate detail about who you are. Are you going to be profitable for you as an organization or not? That is who we are. Not just a credit bureau, but your efficiency leader in credit risk management. Thank you very much.
Kamau, thanks. So I would now like to invite my panelists. Can I start with Rose Muturi? Rose is Regional Director for Tala. Rose, karibu. Then Nancy Kinyanjui. Nancy is Head of Products and Analytics at Creditinfo. Then my brother George Njuguna. George is, so first, George, please have a seat here. There's another seat. We're missing one seat. George is CIO of the year. And of course, he is also CIO for Housing Finance. So we want to kick off, but it seems like the moderator wamemsahau kiti. So I'll just pull that chair. Don't worry. No, but CIO up there. No. All right. So one of us to sort of give background of their day-to-day roles, how the issue of cybersecurity and fraud is affecting their day-to-day lives. Now, don't worry if I interrupt you, to just sort of maybe get a point out from each one of you. But what I also want to say is that this is your evening. A lot of the questions I expect and queries and concerns will probably come from you guys. So let's kick off by asking George to give us a quick intro of his day-to-day. And George, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ali, for the good intro. Ali has introduced me a few times, and each time it's always better than the other. But I notice he introduces Rose better, so I'm still weighing. But my typical day does not go without a conversation on security. I think beginning with, we have, being a regulated institution, every single person is looking at risk. And I think financial services is all about risk. We can't eliminate it, but we need to manage it, mitigate it as much as we can. But being in the technology space, IT security reports into me. And I'm in a group where all the CIOs of the banks, at least 80% of them are in that group. I formed that group, invited a few people. It's strictly one person in the group, but you get a sense people are not talking. And then so you see something in the newspapers and you probe the person and you get intel, but they're still quiet. So they then ping you on the side. They're like, "Enyewe tumegongwa." So we need to be more open and talk about it, because it is happening. People are being hit in the hundreds of millions. They're being hit with the same MO. And the fraudsters are collaborating. So you then find out you're dealing with something that's coming from Congo, Tanzania, West Africa. You're like, now me in my Nairobi office here, how am I going to deal with this? It's actually a syndicate on organized crime. And locally, we are not collaborating. I think it's beyond the banks. We have to collaborate with everybody else in the industry. And I remember we were dealing with an issue, and I called Kamau. When we just started digital lending, I guess everybody goes through it. I don't know, Tala has probably gone through it, branch, where all of a sudden all these, you're very happy your numbers are going up, then you realize some of them are fraudsters. And we called them and we actually had a conversation like, how do we, because our credit scoring engines from Creditinfo, and you have to be willing to collaborate and work with players, but more so, I think one of the things we've done well, other than having a 24/7 security operations center, is I'm now adopting, last year, I'm sure, Ali, if you had me talk, I was talking about DevOps. Now I'm talking about DevSecOps. Embedding security at the very beginning of your journey in everything you do, testing. So I don't want to lose our agility and our speed to market and being able to deploy faster than any other financial institution. But so I need security in from the beginning. So the security guys are not seeing as cops who are standing at the door saying, what are you about to bring in? Let's search your box. They're actually part of creating the bugs to begin with. So as you go to market, you ensure that security is embedded in everything you're doing.
But I think the point is you are sort of an incident center of reporting and looking at what actually happens from a cybersecurity perspective across the country. Over to you.
So thank you very much and good evening, everybody. I think that I'm the only inappropriately dressed person today.
Clearly.
George said we run a 24/7 SOC. Our role is really to look at Security Operations Center, rather CSOC, Cybersecurity Operations Center. We kind of like are the National Cybersecurity Center for the country, and indeed we work with very many partners. Okay. But what I'd want to say is that cybersecurity, people might think cybersecurity is a technology issue, but for me, I think it's more of a people issue. It's really not about technology. Technology facilitates, it makes it easier to understand the challenges that we have, but really the real thing about cybersecurity is about people. It's about meeting people. It's about building the capacity of the people that will be able to utilize the tools, the procedures, the technologies that are there to enhance, the cyber resilience for the country. As it is right now, globally we have a shortage of almost 3 million people in terms of skills for cybersecurity. That says something, and that number is bound to grow. It was about 2.5 million a couple of months ago. We are almost nearing 3 million people. And that's the shortage that we have for cybersecurity skills globally. And that's a global concern.
From a Kenyan perspective?
Kenyan, I don't have the numbers, but I can tell you relatively it's also high. That's what you're trying to say. It's about information sharing, as George has said. The modus operandi, same kind of attack is bound to affect somebody else. And that's why information sharing comes in. Again, there's no technology there. That's about people again. Yeah, it's about also sharing expertise. And that's why fireside chats like this are very important, where you sit down and speak to people and understand what other people are going through. It's about sharing information. So by and large, 80 or the majority % of the challenges that you have in cybersecurity can actually be solved by talking to people. And that's why I say it's a people issue. Of course, technology plays a part, but actually, in my opinion, technology is at the tail end. The rest is about having a standardized way of thinking and doing things. And that's where standards come in. That's where processes comes in. That's where procedures come in. So we really need to have a common understanding and a common methodology of doing things. That again sorts out a lot of issues, even before you get to technology. Then eventually, obviously, because of big data and all that stuff, we need to deploy technology to help us understand. You've just seen what the presentation that has just been made. You can't do that manually, obviously. You must deploy technology, but technology comes at the tail end to assist you in making what you want to do easier. I think that's what I wanted to start. In terms of partnerships, we work with, again, and come again back to people, we work with people across sectors, both locally and internationally. So locally, obviously, we work with law enforcement, all arms of law enforcement. We also work with other government agencies, obviously, because we monitor the cyber threat capabilities, or rather the cyber threat landscape, rather, of the whole country, and that includes government, obviously. We work with the financial sector, including the banks, central banks, KBA, and I think we'll have a conversation with George on how to enhance that. Obviously, we work with academia because of research and also innovation. We work with, obviously, the telcos. And one of the reasons why telcos play a very key role is because cyber threats are propagated through technology, through infrastructure. And yet over 90%, and in the Kenyan case over 95% of infrastructure is run by the private sector. So you really don't have an option. You can't talk about cybersecurity without deliberately engaging with the private sector. So the telcos who run infrastructure, the ISPs play a are some of our key partners, because it's through them that we work to make sure that we not only understand the threat landscape, but we also assist in terms of resolving any incidences that happen. Again, cybersecurity is a global problem. Technology infrastructure is global in nature, so we have partners outside the country. We have players including social media providers. I think case in point is what you've seen here. You're using social media to determine the credit rating of somebody, isn't it? But at the same time, you have 10,000 phones that can actually create somebody's profile. So, you know, it has to be really a balance between the two. So we work with social media providers, we work with domain name registrars, because at the end of the day, a cyber attack will require a domain name, for instance. So registries become very important partners in what we do. Among other players, the Googles of this world, and so on and so forth. So for me, I think the message is, cybersecurity is more of a people issue. The technology is there, well and good, but at the end of the day, there must be somebody. If you handle the people element, then you're bound to resolve most of the issues that ail us. Thank you.
That's interesting. Vincent, thank you very much. Nancy, over to you. So your day-to-day job, how do you help your clients, your customers? Okay.
Thank you for that. For me, I've been in the credit information industry for the last 9 years, and I've seen it evolve over time, from when we used to get negative data only to positive data, and then now with the evolution of fintech, we're even getting unstructured data. So with the digitalization, a lot has come. We've opened up more environments for fraud, and a lot of my customers who are mobile lending institutions have it's not necessarily unique problems, but it's the same problem across all of them. And from where I see it on a day-to-day perspective, identity theft is what's key in fintech, right? So we are finding a lot of my clients who come and say that we had this set of customers, they had legitimate IDs, they had legitimate phone numbers, they hit our systems, and we are able to give them loans, only to find out that those customers were actually fraudulent customers, right? So there's an aspect of verification when the customer is plugging into your platform. If the verification is not right, then obviously you're being hit by fraudsters.
So how do you do this?
So from a Creditinfo perspective, we've come up with algorithms that sort of detect such things. Like, we are able to link a specific phone number to a phone number that's registered to that specific customer. So if one of my clients sends a phone number, say for my ID, and it's not registered to my ID in the credit bureau,
you can match that.
Yes, we can match that, and we can definitely tell you that that's a fraudulent application. Another thing that comes up when it comes to fraud and fintechs, and what fintechs need to know, they pick a lot of information like geolocation, right? You find that if you can tag that geolocation, you find a pool of customers tend to hit your system from one specific time. If you're receiving that information, we plug it in our solutions and we're able to tell you that this is a fraudulent application. So it's very interesting, and we have algorithms that actually do that.
Great. I'll come back to you, Nancy. Antri. You've been now in operation, what, 4 years?
Yeah, we're almost 5.
You're almost 5?
Right, thank you. So first of all, if you have 30 applications for banking and mobile apps, I think your phone has very good memory, so well done on that. Now, when it comes to how many customers we have, we've categorized it into 3, because you have what you call the vanity matrix. So 5 million is a nice number in terms of downloads. However, now the ones we count are slightly now above 2.5 million taking a loan with us. So those are the ones we count. The opportunity, of course, there lies in the rest of the numbers. Stop this. So it really helps actually to be in a tech environment.
Thanks, Rose. So now we are back to that cycle. Please talk to us about that.
Oh, wow. I think it's quite interesting, and the definition of alternative basically varies from one sector to another. But the fact that Google has come up with this policy that you can't scrap data doesn't mean you can't have information about your customer. So one of the things that we noticed when we were analyzing this information from data from our clients is we would find customers who would have a lot of money going out and not money coming in, right? And it's not going out to pay bills, it's just going peer-to-peer. So your wallet is basically used to send out money.
My name is Duncan Muchangi, and I have a question to know.
Which organization?
Yes, I come from a company called Element. That your phone number is an extension of your identity. And this is perhaps a question to you, Vincent. Your phone number is not an extension of your identity, so why are you using that to cross-check, or to validate the customers?
Okay, great. I'll take 2 more questions, and then I'll get back to my panelists.
This question will be directed to Rose. So as much as you're getting information about me for you to be able to lend me money, from what these apps are doing, they're actually infringing into, as much as I give you permission, they're infringing into taking information about my contacts, my SMSs. So you gather so much data that whatever money you're giving me, you're actually getting more out of it. So what's your take on that?
I dealt with it last year in August. People are operating that place near Narok. What is it called? No. The place where the fraudsters were. Kamau, the case we had. What is it called? It has a name. They even recorded a clip and said we're the ones hitting you.
What?
Yeah. It's some place just past. I'll remember the name. So essentially, guys over there were working with some agents of a telco. I won't say which ones. They were registering lines with real people, real IDs. And essentially, when we do our checks, we check IPRS, tick. We check the telco, tick. But then this specific check she's talking about worked. Because when we check there, we realize that Dwayne has a different number there than what we are seeing here. And that actually, they ended up netting people in Donholm, Nakuru, Njoro, a number of places because of that check. So it actually works. It may not be perfect, but if you find that so-and-so, and those numbers were new. They were starting with 0795. Actually, if I see a loan from 0795, I don't want to give it. But these guys were borrowing at a rate that was crazy. They were borrowing from, and I'm quite honest, so they know the bank is not watching, and they borrow so much. So you are very happy in the morning your numbers are up, but essentially it's the same people that are playing the same games with you, and then now you hear this recording, and they're telling you we are here and we're the ones doing it. It's like, this is insane. Now, the sad thing is another bank, I'll call it a blue bank, had just been hit with the same thing 2 weeks back, and I wish they had told us, because now the telco in question said, actually, you guys are not alone. Somebody else just was going through this, and I really believe the government is imploring us as banks to share any incidents of cybersecurity we have. I think we then work with offices like his, Cyber Fusion from CBK, but if this intel was out sooner, we would have ensured that this control was in place. Obviously, it leaves out Kenyans, perhaps who've never borrowed and are not on the CRB database, but at least it protects you from such people.
Great. Rose, then I'll come back to you. Vincent, please pass on the mic to...
So this is different. I'm not answering a question. I want to ask another specifically to the panel. May I? So now...
Why are you turning against your own panel?
I'm not turning. I'm actually... It's something we need to talk about. So for instance, we do have a few digital lenders where we've come together, and we are in the process of finalizing the registration of the association, because we do realize the threats and the challenges we face are pretty unique. So one of the lenders actually said, hey, we just had a fraud issue, we have a few numbers, and I would really, and it was actually the head of operations saying, I would really want to share with you the numbers so that you also look out and don't touch. Now, all of us were excited. We're like, this is good because we can use this information. However, you come back and think about there's a whole issue of data protection. So you're sharing personal data in between companies without the proper framework. So that was issue number one, where we said, hold on. Then secondly, remember, when it comes to fraud, and especially with identity theft, it's a difficult situation where whom do you report? You're talking about a loan of maybe 6,000 bob, 2,000 bob, and it was false identity. So you cannot even go forward to the authorities and say this person is fraudulent because their ID was stolen. So some of the challenges we face are, we will flag the numbers, we will flag the IDs, but for sure, these are people who are just victims of circumstances, and we don't have a single source of truth where we can input all this information and say, these are the numbers, because I'm sure every financial institution has been affected, but everyone has their own secret database, if you will. So I don't know how we can be able to solve that and move forward before we answer the data protection question.
So I think maybe, Rose, one of the things would be to look at precedents. Sharing information is not new. It's just that in the digital age, it's sort of on steroids. So you have, instead of dealing with 10 people at a go, you're dealing with 100,000 plus people. Now, I know you also asked a question regarding, you are getting so much information from me when you're downloading the app, but you're getting, yes, you're giving me money, but you're getting more information. See, this is a conversation that is currently ongoing. See, one thing that you want to understand first is that digital lenders are not just one. Major banks are also digital lenders. You have Housing Finance here, you have Timiza, you have MKey, which is part of Equity, you have Mshwari, you have KCB M-Pesa. So the question that we need to ask is simple. Why? So the issue is not why are you taking information? No, you are giving that information willingly, number one. All right? Why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? So there are mitigating issues here. Number one, you will never be seen physically. I mean, if you ask Rose where their offices are, she'll probably not tell you. She won't tell you. Because they are actually dealing virtually. Everything is virtually, is in-app and all that. So you've come onto Tala. You are borrowing 20K, all right? Tala, you could be one of the fraudulent, guys. So what is now currently happening is that there's a framework going on to mitigate against those privacy issues. Google is asking guys to make certain changes and stuff like that. But ultimately, this privacy conversation will continue. It's not something that we can answer here today. It's very fluid. You've got your data protection bill, which is currently waiting for approval, I think, by the cabinet. There's been a lot of public participation between different players and government in terms of how that will look in the future going forward. So I think Laura had a burning question, so we'll give Laura, and then I'll come back to the panel, and then we'll come back to the audience again. Laura, you had a question. Don't worry, everyone will get an opportunity.
Laura has been overridden by 2 burning questions at her table, so I will hand over the mic.
Thank you, Laura. My name is Dwayne from Good Info. So this is a very interesting chart, just listening to some of the challenges taking place. As a suggestion, I imagined in my mind a solution where, for example, we could have a group with unique identifiers. Because if you think about why people don't want to share information, it's because they're afraid it will somehow tarnish their brand. But it's really key we share this information so that other people can be aware that a certain type of thing is taking place. So imagine, a thing like, okay, I don't want to call it like a WhatsApp group or something, but really a place where people share information, but instead of using their brands or personally identifiable information like their names, there would be a pre-verified unique ID, right? Like a GUID or something of the sort. And these GUIDs would then, of course, they would be pre-verified by an entity, and then they would post specific information about what has happened in their environments, what kind of attacks they've experienced, and so on and so forth. And it's not important to know who that GUID is associated with. All that's important really at the end of the day is to know that such and such a thing has happened at a pre-verified institution that is mandated or allowed to be a member of this group. So that's just a brain thought I had.
Okay, my name is Michael Meshe from Oriental Bank. One question and one statement. I'd just like to add on what Rose had said about the association, and he's touched on that a bit. Yes, there's the issue of when you mentioned privacy and you're sharing these numbers. That's not the important thing. Forget about sharing the numbers. The most important thing is the mechanism of how these attacks happened. And you want to, as he mentioned, you are trying to protect your brand. So how do you, in a trusted space, communicate valid information that this happened, and no one can go there and say, I know who number 42 is. It's so and so. So one key, you can look at a prototype model that exists in the wild. That's a pseudonymous system that's built as a mini distributed ledger. So what happens is you all meet in a central location, you pick your tokens, and you go. These tokens are encrypted and encode and entrust the information you send. So even the regulator cannot wake up tomorrow and come and say, okay, you wrote about this and this, how much did you lose? So that takes care of that whole issue. Now my question to George and Vincent, information sharing has been, we need to always share information, and that helps. We're sharing information about an attack that cost $30, and our solutions come to about $30,000. Can we at some moment just decide we are paying too much for security and we are paying too little to be breached? I'm surprised there are times I can get a free spamming tool for 10 minutes. And I'm being given a spamming solution that's costing me $1 million Kenyan shillings just to prevent spamming of my own account. Is there a point where the regulator or even the nation stands up and says, well, we won't be bullied by corporate prices. We understand you are a business, but our citizens, their privacy and their safety comes first. So our solution is simple. You want to be in this market, this is how you get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Back to my panelists. First, let me just say we are trending. We are number 2. Can we get to number 1, please? Who wants to go first? Vincent, you are, where's the other mic? There you are. Great.
Yeah, thank you. First I wanted to just to reiterate what George said, and he alluded to the issue of internal threats, where we are seeing that most of the challenges that we had on cyber, and that's why I was talking about people being the main thing on cybersecurity, is one of the biggest challenges is insider threats, and I'm sure you've seen that. So you have all the technology to have deployed, but you have somebody inside the telco doing all the right things, and yet they're actually fraudulent. So how do you beat that? I think the people element comes again into play, and I think it's an area of focus. But coming back to 2 things that have been raised. One is about the anonymous reporting. And we've seen a lot of that, especially when people are saying, we really want to tell you what's happening, but we don't want it to be attributed to us for either a good or a bad reason. So the issues of the challenges of responsible disclosure have come into play. I like the suggestion on distributed ledgers and how that has worked elsewhere. I think it's something I can also learn from. I know the CBK is looking at ways of anonymizing the reporting to support and encourage information sharing, and I think that's important because what is important is what is happening, not who is reporting the information. As a national SAT, we're doing the same thing. We are currently in the process of building a platform or a mechanism of ensuring that whatever we receive is anonymous. And I think we've already received some very interesting suggestions here. But the issue of information sharing is critical, let me tell you. You don't need to spend an arm and a leg. I mean, George said the MO is the same. If a bank is hacked today, I can assure you there's a very high probability that the same attacker will target another bank if they weren't doing it at the same time. I can assure you. These are things that we've seen trends, we've analyzed data, and that's what's happening. But it goes beyond the financial sector. It goes to the whole of society. What we need to do is to share information in a certain way that information benefits everybody. Because I can assure you, if your neighbor is weak, then I can assure you they become the weakest link towards your infrastructure. So I just want to reiterate, Ali, that the role of information sharing is very critical because it also helps in terms of understanding the threat landscape, but also putting inexpensive interventions that will make sure that the whole ecosystem is safer.
Great.
There was the issue of the cost of technology. I think one of the issues that we have with the cost of technology is that we are net importers of technology. And I'll tell you that it's from hardware, software, it's a whole thing. And I think it's a high time that as a country, because we have brilliant people around here, that we take it upon ourselves to develop local solutions to our problems. Because you can easily negotiate with a local person than negotiating with other people because you don't have an option, isn't it? And I'll give you an example. If you look at the statistics of social media, I won't talk about any social media platform in particular. You'll be shocked that over 90%, actually almost 100% of the conversations happen between Kenyans within Kenya. So you need to ask yourself whether you need to use a foreign platform to talk about yourselves, where data leaves the country, goes elsewhere, then comes back, or we take it upon ourselves to develop local solutions that will serve us. That way issues of data protection become localized instead of being internationalized. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, George. Then we'll go to Rose.
I think where I've come from, watu wangasema hiyo point ni point ya nguvu sana. I don't know what's trending. I hope it's not another scandal or safe in a bank. Anita will walk out if it's associated near us. But we better get to number one. Mitch has raised a good point, but I think my co-panelist has just blown it out of the water. We need to do our own thing. Because anytime I get a developer locally, and Good Info are giving me developers at times, I'm paying them probably $2,000 to $3,500 a month. If I get an international developer, we're starting to talk at $1,000. Now we talk about all these great things and JQuat and Strathmore, but where are the solutions? Other than customizing something that somebody else has made, what are we building that's solving our existing problems?
That's a good challenge.
And so I think we need to do that. And I think the point you've raised is fantastic. And we build our own things, we build them locally, not just apps, but we build platforms that actually help solve the bigger problems. Because if the conversations happening on social media are happening between Kenyans and they're talking about Njugush and what, why do you need to go to YouTube? Why don't we have our own YouTube that's KenyaTube or whatever that's locally where we're posting our content? Because most of what we're consuming is actually local. Now going to the cost, I think also we need to be innovative around it. I'm a big advocate of open source, and whereas security is the least area I use open source, I still do embrace it in certain areas. But how can you take that open source solution, customize it to your need, and be able to deploy it into your environment the right way? Because I think actually what's more important is not how heavy the technical solution is, but how well it can work in your environment and solve your problem. I think gone are the days where people are looking to buy IBM, Oracle, Microsoft, and whoever, HP. People are now looking for solutions that work. And so we've now started looking east We're now buying things from countries that typically you wouldn't mention, because people are now looking for return on investment on something that works, something that's proven, that's tested. But I think I can't add anything else beyond what he said. Let's do our own thing. And once we do it, we'll create employment, and probably there will be less money being discovered in safes, and more of it will actually be blockchain or something like that.
Great. Rose, I know you posed a question to the panel. Have we answered it?
Not particularly, but...
Do you want to repeat it?
Well, it was more on... Yes, I understand that the fundamental thing here is let's try and figure out where the attack is coming from. And for us, being a technology company, we are really alive to the fact that the attacks that we are prone to are also very smart and very tech-oriented. So the question I was posing was just when you take a step back and you know one of the biggest issues that affects a digital business is identity fraud. And here, forget the fraudster. You're talking about another real individual who's affected. And this information you cannot share because of, one, data protection. Number two, according to the law, you're supposed to prove beyond a shadow of doubt that this is actually fraudulent. It's a mess. And therefore, you end up saying, you know what, it's not worth the effort of pursuing this because we don't have a repository, we don't have anywhere where you can confidently share such. So I don't know what the solution would be, because right now I know every institution does it on their own. So if you talk about the consumer protection as opposed to the tech side, what do you do to the consumer? Because it's becoming a big deal in our tech environment.
Yeah, but I think, Rose, probably one of the answers is more collaboration, not just in the private sector. And Vincent has raised a very good point that most of the stuff is happening in the private sector. So governments could possibly be a partner from a policy perspective, from regulatory perspective. One of the things that I keep talking about a lot is that us guys in the private sector don't engage government enough. We don't. And we wake up one morning, you know, disruption comes in different ways. You can wake up one morning and you've been disrupted out of your business by regulation. And then you ask, which nincompoop is that who put up that law? But when those conversations were happening, you are busy either coding or doing, and you're saying, that's not my problem, until it starts hitting you. So I think more collaboration between private sector, more multi-stakeholder sort of thinking, where we move towards consensus, and you collect different people's perspectives and try and come to a consensus. So I don't think we'll get an answer today, but I think it's a conversation that needs to start. And the fact that we have Vincent here today tells you that from an African perspective, we are trailblazing in a lot of ways, a lot of collaboration between government and private sector. But I'd just like to remind ourselves, as Museveni said, don't sit as Kenyans and compare yourselves to other African countries. It is akin to two pygmies sitting together and one of the pygmies telling the other, I'm taller than you. Let's get out of that sort of mindset. Are we together, guys? Great. Can I take more questions from my audience? Yes, Fidi, could you help? Fidi? I know she wants to win her own prize. She's busy tweeting. Could you help me with the mics, please? Yes. Let's start with that gentleman there, then we go there, and then we go there. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm George from Okolea. So my point is to maybe a question to Vincent. So one of the issues why the fraud is on the rise, I think it's because I don't think anyone is arrested because of doing fraudulent things, ideally, especially in the digital mobile lending space. So is it, I don't know if it's possible, if we can share data with you maybe, because we know where these guys are operating from. We can even know when they move, just for maybe enforcing and knowing where, if they are coming from this point, if you go where they are, maybe you'll find they're operating a small room that's full of mobile phones, that they're doing the illegal stuff. And when they know, when that word spreads around, it also deters those who want to start from doing it.
Was there a question somewhere there, or was it just a comment?
Just a comment.
Okay.
Thank you so much. My name is Gilbert.
I heard you were told not to ask a question because you're a cybersecurity expert.
No.
But I'm going to ignore my panelists. Don't worry. Go ahead.
It's okay. I won't ask a question specific to, but I think maybe my question will come into where we are. Maybe my question will be more on the aspect of we're talking about cybersecurity, but there's the element we're not looking at, the cyber espionage, where state-sponsored attacks. If you look at the state-sponsored attack, it's something that is pretty much, we are not taking it seriously, but pretty much what we are seeing is something real. And I give an example of some of the studies, of course, we have done. You realize there are state-sponsored attacks now because information has become the real gold. So our neighbor, for example, having access to information about our banks, that's gold to them. Now the question comes, as a country, how prepared are we to protect our critical data that can come from, for example, threats from state-sponsored actors? It can be China, for example. And I give an example. There's a study we did where attacks were coming from China towards Kenya as a country, towards our critical infrastructure. Now the question comes in, we are doing a lot of business with these countries that they are interested in our data. What are our banks, for example? How prepared are we towards state-sponsored attacks? Thank you.
I will let Vincent respond to that. But I mean, I can tell you that this is something that is becoming, a serious point for countries across the world. You're talking about, sometimes people say we are already into a third world war. The only thing is that this war is not being fought with weapons, it's been fought with information. Vincent, you want to go first, and then...
I think there are three issues that have been raised. The first one was the issue of arresting people who have been, who are guilty or of fraud, for that matter. I think arrests have been there. Maybe they have not been that highly profiled, but the arrests have actually been there. The other day you saw the DCI listed 100 people, 100 of the top fraudsters in this country. And they requested anybody who has information about them to share with them. I think it's also going to say that, it's a collaborative approach, because, again, if you know somebody who is doing such kind of stuff, it's important to report them so that action is taken against them. But there's also another challenge that we have, because we also are very litigious and, for lack of a better word, civil society-led country, respectfully, because civil society plays a very critical role in terms of providing a lot of alternative opinion, especially to the government. But at the same time, we also face a lot of challenges. And I'll give you an example. In May last year, the president assented to the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. And one of the Kenyans went to court, and a lot of, the implementation of the law was actually stopped. Just because somebody went and said that some of those provisions are unconstitutional. And yet those provisions say that if somebody, conducts any kind of cyber attack, then they are bound to be arrested and, charged, and certain penalties applied to them. So I think we also have a problem of ensuring that as a country we look at what serves us, because you won't talk about, and I can tell you, when people are looking at investing in our country, one of the things that they look at is the policy framework, the legal framework, and you can imagine having those laws being suspended, for example, drive away a lot of investment, because you're not going to come into the digital market if you don't have a way of a recourse when something punitive happens. So I think we really need to look at some of the things that we do as a society to make sure that we create an environment that attracts investment both locally and from foreigners. Gilbert raised the issue, I think, of cyber espionage. It's a global concern, I agree with you, I think we are as prepared as we are right now. But I think it's a global problem, as the moderator said. It's an issue that has been discussed extensively at the UN. And I can assure you, we still don't have a UN resolution or an agreement at the global level on how to deal with issues to do with cybercrime. And one of the biggest challenges that we have in cybercrime is the issue of attribution. Because you can't really tell where a cyber attack is coming from. It might look as if it's coming directly from a certain country, but indeed maybe it's coming, it's hopped through 5 or 6 other countries before it lands on that particular country. And that's one of the problems that we have. I think the best thing is to build a society, because ICTs bring a lot of value. I mean, the transformative nature of ICTs, you know, it can't be argued against. But we need to find a mechanism of ensuring that we build a society that is ethical enough. It's about norms, by the way. It might look as if it doesn't make sense, but I can tell you, if we are going to, we're looking at robotics. We're looking at robots, you know, becoming part of our lives. You know, becoming IoT and so on and so forth. You can imagine we don't have certain ethical ways of handling technology, then it's going to be a very, very difficult world for us, and especially for the ones who come after us. So I think for me, the people element comes again. We really need to build a society that uses technology in a very ethical way so that we can benefit from it.
Thank you very much. I think we've covered most of the stuff. So what I would like to now do is give my panelists an opportunity to do a 1-minute closing, and then hand over back to our hosts. And I think at some point, Fidi, we are going to be announcing who the winner is. I think I'm sitting here and I'm tweeting, so I should be a winner. No? Okay, sawa. Rose?
Right, if you're sitting and tweeting, of which you can't see, that's part of fraud and cyber crimes, which you need to check. But nonetheless, so some of the things actually I can conclude with, some of the things we do as Tala, because we are very alive to the fact that cybersecurity, or let me say cyber threats will always be there. We actually host twice a year an international hackathon, and we tell everyone in our teams globally, whether they're in engineering or not, to try and break into our systems. And there's an award that will be given to whoever manages to. And the beauty about it is they're able to show us the vulnerabilities that may be there and possibly we were not alive to. But we make it very interesting because we can't tell you to break into something you're building, because you know end to end how it is. So we actually have to shift it around a bit. And what we've seen every year we do that is even other departments such as your customer experience team will be able to participate and say this is a potential threat that we're looking at. And we love it because the customers interact with the customer experience team, so they are alive to a few other threats that maybe the engineers would not have looked at. So we really, and it happens overnight, so they enjoy it because they also get free food for the night. But actually, in conclusion, I can say like it's been mentioned a few times before, collaboration, it sometimes sounds cliche, but it's becoming really, really important because you can't live in isolation. You cannot be a silo in that environment. The data that you use is very important, either for good or for bad. For us as a data science company, we fully understand how, if that information lands in the wrong hands, the damage it can cause. And we are happy to participate and willing to take part, and that's why whenever the bills come out and we are asked to publicly participate, we are always there, because we want to influence the policies, we want to influence the decisions, and not be surprised and possibly go to court and say it's not working. We want to be there and say, yes, this can work.
A couple of days ago, I read a report, or I saw a report that says that over 90% of Kenyan organizations are operating below cybersecurity poverty line, okay? And think about that as an institution, but my parting words would be to mostly our clients. I do understand that especially with mobile money, there is a balance that needs to be stricken between fraud and acceptance rate. Maybe trying to pick as many customers as possible, but we are also exposing ourselves to a lot of fraud. So we need to look for ways to mitigate that, and I think Creditinfo can really help you in this instance. Something else that someone talked about, public awareness, and I think as lenders and institutions, we need to embrace being responsible lenders. Your Mama Mboga back in Narok doesn't know anything, so she's the best victim for social engineering. A customer will just call her and tell her, give me your PIN, your phone number, your full names, and they have nothing. They don't know anything about it. There's no public awareness about it, and you find that they are the victims of fraud and cybersecurity. So we need to think about it like that, be responsible borrowers, and as individuals as well, we need to be responsible borrowers as well.
Vincent?
I think I just want to reiterate what George mentioned about how to justify the cost of security, information security for that matter. I think it's one of the biggest things that we have had, but I think approaching it from a risk point of view makes a lot of sense, especially for the C-level and the board, because the board pretty much understands the language of risk much better than any other language, including technology. The average cost of a cyber incident or a cyber crime to a company, research is about $1 million right now. And it's because there are issues to do with brand, and Rose mentioned about that, issues to do with the loss of your brand equity, the issues to do with productivity. Obviously, when your systems are down, you can't run. There are also issues to do with share value. So housing finance has been attacked. You see a dip in the stock exchange because of that. So the cost is real. And it's not only about productivity, it's also about many other things, as I've mentioned. And so with that, because it's industry that really runs government. Government runs through revenue. Revenue is generated by the private sector and other actors who actually do business. The government has taken it seriously, and it's actually putting a lot of measures in place to make sure that we enhance our national cyber resilience as a country. From a policy perspective, the national ICT sector policy is being reviewed. It should be out any time. We are coming up with laws, one being the Computer and Cybercrime Law. Obviously, the issue of data protection, Rose, you mentioned, is also coming up. And I think there's a version in Senate, and there's another one that's also being looked at. Operationally, the government has set up the National SAT, which is really the National Cybersecurity Center that works with very many players across the board. Obvious issues of collaboration are key. Issues of building trust amongst various stakeholders across sectors also becomes important. Awareness, as Eric from Checkpoint mentioned, I think is a very key thing, and you'll see a lot of activity from government. Talk to the public so that we can actually create awareness among the public, who are actually the consumers of technology, to make sure that they have a basic level of understanding in terms of how to protect themselves online. So it's really a concerted effort, and what I'd say is that let's be a brother's keeper, and let's find a way of creating environments. And Rose, one of the issues you raised is about how do you handle this issue. I think it's first what you said about the association, because when you create an association, it's an association of members that have a common cause, and they're bound to trust each other in one way or another. So that's where you start, even as you look at engaging other people. So I think information sharing, collaborating, and building capacity and awareness would be my takeaway. And
great. Thank you, Vincent. George?
Yeah. I think in closing, I'll talk just two things. I think one is, I think within your institutions, it's important you really embrace the principles around red team, blue team. And we worked with this with Gilbert. That's why I told him I don't want him to ask questions, because they are the red team. But essentially, really, you simulate an attack. Actually,
so what's a red team and a blue team?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying now.
Okay.
So the red team is the external guy, the fraudster, and they're trying to get into your system. The blue team is your own mechanisms. And so you allow it to unfold. And you learn so much about what are the gaps within your environment. And a lot of them are on the people side, as Vincent says. But some of them are systems, vulnerabilities left behind, back doors left open. And the goal of the red team is to penetrate your systems. The goal of the blue team is to protect you. But out of it, you're able to then make a case that, you know what, if the red team was not really on our side, this is what would have gone wrong. And I think in closing, something you mentioned about, we've done a lot of work to get IT security into the boardroom. But a lot of it, I think, has taken us beginning to talk and understand and talk business. I used to work in a place where Jack, who's the MD of FinteXX, used to be the IT security manager. But it's really individuals like you making your way into the boardroom so you can sell your story the best, not working through somebody who perhaps doesn't get it. That's why all your papers are rejected even before you're able to put the logo. But you work your way up or find that partner before you get there so you can put your case before the right person, because that's exactly how we've been able to, sorry to use my previous term, to move the dial. But even in security, I think bring it in, because if you are not making the case yourself in the best way possible, you're being crowded out by perhaps somebody who's looking for budget for marketing, for new t-shirts, for new hats, because you couldn't make your case. So you don't want to be the guy who your organization has the best t-shirts and hats, but you're being hacked. With all those t-shirts are going to be used as dusters in the house. So my challenge, I see a lot of great young people here who are really smart. Please make your way up, because you're the one who's going to make a difference. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Before we close and I invite Kamau back up, there were like 2 or 3 questions online that maybe we may want to answer. So this begs the question, how will the Data Protection Bill 2018 affect the operations of such fintech entities that use data heavily in lending decision making? Did we not answer that? Do we maybe want to address it one more time? Yeah, just pass that on to Rose. The other question was on how better will it be to incorporate AI element in cybersecurity? Well, you know, AI is what is being used for fraud, so maybe we need to turn that. George, you will take that. Okay.
All right.
Yes.
So on the data protection, the most important thing was participating when the bills were actually put out for us to look at and to go through them. And speaking on behalf of Tala, we were actually very involved in terms of giving our feedback, proposing what would be the safest place to make sure that the consumers are protected, and we also, on the other hand, do not curtail innovation. So what we're happy about is, especially through the ICT task force, they were actually very good in terms of listening to our concerns and calling us in and saying, hey, we need this to work. We need to collaborate and say, what's the safest place to be at? So I would say by the time they were coming out with a second draft, although right now there are 2 different ones, but by the time the second draft was coming out, we could see the tangible evidence that all of us who participated, something was done about it. So it helped.
Yeah, I think let me also add something on that before George goes. You know, one of the interesting components of the data protection bill was what is known as data sovereignty. So data sovereignty implies that our data in Kenya must remain in Kenya. All right? So some of the questions we asked is, okay, so your government, you're telling us politely, you know, that all our data must remain in country, and yet more than 50% of all government officials still use Gmail and Yahoo. So the question is, do we need to educate ourselves first what data sovereignty is? And do we need to start asking some tough questions in terms of, you know, what that actually means for our country? Yeah. So it's an ongoing conversation. I'm not sure we'll get everything that is required, but engaging, again, we keep on talking about this, and I always keep on emphasizing policy, engagement with government is very critical. And not
I mean, not necessarily from an adversarial perspective, you know. That is, again, why we have Vincent here today, you know, to ensure that we are on the same page. After all, we are all Kenyans, right? George, over to you.
Thanks. I think, Ali, I'm finding it very awkward that I'm talking again, because I went to a school when they said fall out, you went, and you left. But anyway, I'll come back. Think about AI. When you start operating at exponential levels of data and customers operating at all times of the day, so many systems, we are probably operating now on no less than 4 or 5 data centers. The amount of human beings you need to be able to look at that is really impossible. So we now start taking tools that are able to do correlation, and a simple SIM does not do that, a security identity and events management system. You now start looking at correlation. But correlation alone is not enough. You need to make decisions. So at the decision level is now where artificial intelligence, the machine learning begins to take place, and actually big data. So these are not just buzzwords. In IT security, these are real things. Because how many times, I mean, you look at the transactions that we are processing per second, there are so many. And a human being sitting there they're doing just best effort with the screens we have at the SOC. You really need a machine that really narrows down and says, this looks suspicious. Now, typically what happens in our environments, when something looks suspicious, they'd call the IT security manager. Eventually it's 2 a.m., George is woken up, probably my kids are hungry, I'm cranky. But if you have AI and those type of things, a decision can be made before you even call me. You need to shut this down or stop this type of transaction, then move on. So I believe these new technologies, they're not just buzzwords. They're things we need to incorporate into our IT operations to allow us to be more responsive to these threats.
George, thank you very much. And with that, I want to really say a big thank you to my panel. And I think they deserve a major thank you, guys. At this point, I would like to invite, I'm asked to pause, just hold on. Okay, guys, I'm told you need to come back. Sorry, fall back in. There's something small we need to give you guys. Something a little small. Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Jane. Nancy, sorry. Vincent, thank you. And George, of course, thank you. Great. Kamau, over to you. Thank you. Oh, this is for me. Thank you.
The panelists, Rose, Nancy, Vincent, and George, and our moderator, Ali, thank you very much. And more importantly to the audience, thank you very much for coming. As you can imagine, before setting this up or agreeing to go ahead with this, there's a lot of jitters. You know, is it going to work? Are we going to get any information out of it? The feedback, is it going to be good? But I mean, all in all, I've got to say it's been a good turnout. Thank you all very, very much. Please give yourselves a hand. Thank you very much. I think it's something we'd want to be doing, you know, on a regular basis. I think the next one is scheduled for sometime in June. We shall be putting it out there what we shall be talking about. But even just from this session, I think we've gotten quite a bit of information that we can take away. I mean, there's so many pieces out there. Everything is about data today. data, when it's easily available or accessible, becomes a security threat. So people are not willing to share it, but you need to share it for you to be able to access services. So all these things put together really creates this puzzle. And how do we solve that puzzle? And unless we can actually be able to collaborate, something that I kept hearing, and even more importantly, as Vincent said, if we find our own local solutions to our problems, we'll be at a better place where we feel freer to be able to share our data, to be able to get the services that we want when we want it at the right price and at the right quality. And I think that's what everyone wants to achieve, isn't it? So I think it's been a good session. I hope we've all been able to get some good information out of it. And lastly, and obviously, I hope you all know where to come and get the solutions. Thank you very much.
We come to the point where Fidi wants to give out some stuff for the Twitterati. Fidi, who are the winners? Who are the guys who tweeted? Okay, so we are trending at #1. Wow, that's amazing.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a fantastic event. As Kamau said, we were extremely nervous about doing it for the first time, and the turnout is absolutely fantastic. So the results are in. My very abled colleague, Irene, has been doing the checks to see who's been tweeting the most. So we have 2 names. So we have Jack Rooster. A round of applause. If you don't know him, he's a DJ, very fierce DJ, but he's a nerd. He is like a super techie guy, and we collaborate with him a lot with Creditinfo and just doing a couple of things. Yeah, so congratulations, Jack. Don't go just yet. You have to take a picture with your other winner. So Irene tells me Grace A. G. L. Okay, I can't even think. Grace. Maybe you can tell us how you pronounce your handle. I think, I don't know whether I'm getting it right, but yeah. Congratulations. Okay, so how do you say your handle?
G. Alwot.
Oh, G. Alwot. Oh, God. That is so easy. Okay, so guys, if you just want to, yeah. And have a picture. So thank you everyone for coming. The session I think is closed right now, so you can just go back to the bar and have some bitings, have some drinks, and live at your own pleasure. Yeah?
Thank you everyone.
So much.
Much appreciated. Thanks.